I figured I'd share with you some strange and what I believe to be paranormal experiences happening at my place of employment. I work at an old restaurant in a city in Oregon. I will not say which restaurant for obvious reasons. I work as the bread baker during the night hours. My shift is usually from 8:30 p.m. till around 3 a.m., depending on which products need to be made. My co-workers tend to leave at 10 o'clock. Sometimes the dishwasher is there a little later, though I got lucky moving here and landing this job right away at $13 an hour. But now, I don't feel so lucky. My first experience was the second month of working here. I had just put some hamburger buns in the proofer and had some time to kill, so I walked into the dining area and made myself some espresso. Halfway there, I noticed a faint whistling coming from the dining area. I shrugged it off, as it stopped once I entered. As soon as the espresso was done, the whistling started again, but louder. I couldn't make out if it was a song or not. But it went on for about a minute and then stopped. My whole body shivered, as I was definitely creeped out. The next day I mentioned this to the dishwasher, and she looked at me for a minute and then sighed. She told me the building was most definitely haunted, and that she constantly hears the whistling as well, but only when she's by herself. Sadly, the conversation ended there, as she doesn't speak English all that well. Fast forward a few weeks later. This experience freaked me out quite badly for a few days. I still get chills thinking about it. You may not think it's creepy, but it was. They have a huge walk-in cooler, filled with tons of prepped food, and so on. This was about 11 p.m, and the dishwasher was still there. I walked into the cooler to grab some butter. The door is huge and heavy, and there is no way wind could shut the door, especially because there was no wind to shut it. As I was reaching for the butter, I hear the door slam behind me. I was obviously startled, and thought maybe the dishwasher closed it, thinking I left it open by accident. I walked to the door, and started yelling for her, hoping she would hear me, and after about 3 minutes, no response. I panicked. It was super cold in there, and I kept banging on the door and yelling. And about 10 minutes later, she finally heard me and opened it, looking confused. Shivering, I asked her if she closed the door on me, and she said no. I told her that the door closed on me, and the look on her face freaked me out. I texted my boss and told him what happened, and asked him to check the security cameras. When he answered, he told me he watched, and said that he saw me walk in, and about 10 seconds later, the door slammed shut. No one was behind it. It just shut by itself. That never happened to anyone else. We were both confused, and I was weary. A few weeks after, in the dining room, they mopped the floors after every night. I noticed that they were in their usual spot on the tables, and I didn't think much of it. As I was making bread dough, at about 12 a.m, something happened that I can't explain. In a span of almost 5 to 10 seconds, I heard the loudest crash coming from the dining area that shook the whole building, and the lights went out quickly and came back on. My heart was beating so fast and I felt nauseous. I had no idea what happened. I ran into the dining room and my heart sank from fear. All of the chairs were on the floor, scattered, and a few definitely broken, and then the whistling began. I immediately called my boss, and he rushed over. We went to the office and watched the security cameras. The video showed the chairs on the top of the tables, and then the lights went out. They came back on, and the chairs were scattered all over the floor. The look on his face filled my body with dread. He promised to stay with me for the rest of the night, and I told him I was becoming scared of working by myself. He said I would be fine. This happened a few days ago, and it took everything in me not to quit this job. This was probably the scariest thing I've ever experienced. It was around 2:30 a.m. The baguettes were in the oven, and it was almost time for me to leave. I had to use the restroom, so I walked into the dining room to get to the restroom. I heard the whistling, but very faint. It was becoming normal, and since nothing had happened for a while, I wasn't creeped out. I got to the restroom, locked the door, and sat down to do my business. About 10 seconds in, I hear a faint whisper come from outside the door. I chalked it up to just hearing things, and then I heard someone knock very lightly. My heart stopped. I was alone, or so I thought. I sat there in silence. Another light knock. I very quietly finished my business and pulled myself together. I stood somewhat closer to the door to try and hear what was outside the door. Another knock, and then I heard a faint whisper say, "Hello?" I almost screamed and almost pissed my pants, even though I had already peed. I kept quiet, in fear. Maybe this wasn't a ghost, but a junkie or creeper who managed to slip inside somehow. It knocked again, louder this time. The voice whispered, "I know you're in there." It sounded like a man's voice, but I couldn't tell, and it began to jiggle the door handle. And that is when I flipped out. I screamed, "Leave me alone!" The handle jiggled more violently and then stopped abruptly. I stood there in fear. After about a minute, it slammed the door so hard, I was surprised it didn't fling open. My heart was racing, and tears were streaming down my cheeks. Everything went silent for a good 20 seconds, and there was another loud bang that shook the whole restaurant. The door swung open so violently, and there was no one there. I ran out of there so fast, screaming and crying. The chairs were flung about, tables overturned, coffee cups shattered on the ground. I ran into the kitchen and grabbed my things, shut the ovens off. Hell, I didn't care if the baguettes were done or not, and ran out of the building and into my car. I called my boss, sobbing and hyperventilating, and he told me to wait in my car. He arrived about 5 minutes after, his car flying into the parking lot. I got out, but told him I would not be going back in there.